Sorry.
Okay, now I think we just lost the signal over here.
Yeah. I'm going to show them the,
I could have pulled the plugs.
is it? Sorry.
All right. So Ramsay is going to talk about the failed revolution. So we'll just
Well, it didn't fail. We just wanted it to fail.
yes, yes. So
So does that mean the title should be rewritten?
Yeah, exactly. Let's start over. Come back tomorrow.
What does the 25 refer to? Last year?
oh, that's the wrong date for today. Thank you. Okay, take it away, Ramsay.
Take it away. Yeah, let's. You can see what happened already. We already lost it.
No, I'll go.
Go back. Go back.
There you go.
There we go. There we go. Iko and John watched the game in our living room, and Janet and Iko talked about all sorts of stuff endlessly, interrupting our. It was. We're ne're never inviting them back again. I don't know what's going on here.
Fighting that mindless pursuit of a pigskin ball going down the court.
Yeah. Well, we were waiting for the praise God stuff that happened after the game, but never mind.
Oh, there you go. Of course,
Yeah.
religiosity, right?
Yeah. Well, as various people have pointed out, both sides pray. So what's the deal here?
Hey,
Well, what I liked was the moment when Signetti raised two fingers up to the heavens as if to thank God, and the Gatorade came down on
At that
him.
very moment, Gatorade came out of the sky. Yeah.
Manna from heaven.
No kidding. Yeah, that's a Florida invention too. We gotta get off this and get on to the real business of the day here.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So this is not a Debbie Downer. I guess I'd have to be a Donnie Downer or whatever. Since we're going to celebrate 250 years of the Declaration of Independence this year, we could say, well, you know what? Let's just have a little discussion about how the United States may have evolved if we'd have lost the darn War of Independence. What were some possibilities here? I have no idea what the map would look like after 1760. Some of you know this. We won our War of Independence, but the North, the people up north above us, we now call it Canada, hung on with the British for quite a while and eventually won independence too. They didn't have to fight with the revolution. They just sort of waited patiently and were allowed self-government. The same thing happened with Australia and New Zealand. So there's some sort of comparison to say, what if we'd have lost that and became independent just like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand did? How would we be a different sort of country?
Can you argue even that, though? If we had not won that war, would Canada and Australia have become fully independent?
We could argue it. Whether it would be an accurate argument is a different question. But the argument tends to go, I think, that India was the big prize, and Britain had enough on its plate just taking care of India that it was not going to deny white people independence. And we'll make a little bit of an argument about how Parliament had changed dramatically between 1776 and the 1860s, 1870s. There had been a real change in how Parliament operated, the principles that was enshrined there, so forth and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, this is a silly little map. None of us have any idea. I will argue that Mexico would probably be a lot bigger today if we hadn't won independence back then. Canada may. Yeah, this is an interesting question. I Googled it today and not get much of a happy answer. Whether what we now call Vermont, which didn't even exist at that stage, it existed a little later, Maine, New Hampshire, maybe even upper state New York would have preferred to be aligned with the British still and not been part of the revolution. Who knows? But here's some stuff that I think is not new to anybody, but maybe it is. I mean, it was the War of 1812 that pretty much solidified the identity that the Canadians have of themselves now. I mean, Janet and I learned this driving through Canada in 2016, just listening to Canadian CCB, Canadian Broadcast Company, and they were all over that. Oh yeah, this is the anniversary of when the War of 1812 was over, and we stayed free, and that was a real Independence Day. And some of you are familiar with the War of 1812, right? That there was a bunch of war hawks, thugs down south from Indiana, for a guy named William Henry Harrison, for example, the only Indiana president at the time, leading the war hawks to say, look, the British are preoccupied with their war against Napoleon. Now it's our chance to grab Canada. Let's go. And the Westerners in the U.S. and the Southerners said, great idea. The New Englanders said, no way in hell. All the fighting's going to be on our territory. In fact, if you do that, we may secede and we may join Canada. There was a real discussion of that, actually. Yeah, I think we're all familiar with how the War of 1812 worked out. It ended up as more or less a draw. But there's a couple graphics down below. April 1813. Rarely talked about in U.S. history courses. What happened in the War of 1812 and 1813? There's the United States burned the capital of Canada. It was then called York. Now we call it Toronto, and burned the Parliament building. And so the horrible thing that the British then did when they got to Washington D.C. in August of 1814 actually makes a little bit more sense. They burned our White House, and many architectural historians say actually it was a good idea because the White House was really poorly constructed, and the rebuilding was a lot better. And then only a month later, up in Baltimore, well, some of us were lucky enough to grow up in Baltimore. This great moment happened when the Fort McHenry was bombarded by the British, but the flag was still flying a couple days later, and we got the national anthem. And of course, we sing this before all of our sporting events, and which is an odd little thing anyway. It turns out that the U.S. government barely helped saving Baltimore. The Baltimoreans had to do it all themselves because the U.S. government had pretty much disappeared. But whatever. Canadian independence. Canadians stretching all the way to the Pacific Ocean. It's an interesting story, if you've never heard it before. 1867, the Dominion of Canada is granted by the British government, and the same in New Zealand and the same in Australia at the same time. It was only the pink and the orange there in that map. It wasn't very big, but the British government was pretty much forcing the Hudson Bay Company to sell all that is in that pale purple, and so which it looks like it's an enormous amount of territory. Well, it is an enormous amount of territory, but hardly anyone lived there, so it was not exactly well inhabited. And in 1871, I mean in 1870, and then there was a question of what's going to happen with British Columbia. And the British Columbians said, "Look, we don't want to be part of the United States." So we're willing to join this thing that you're calling Canada, but you have to assure us that we're going to get connected to the East Coast. So what are the plans for building a railroad? And they said, there are plans. We're going to build a Continental Railroad. That'll happen. So the British Columbians said, yes, we will join Canada. Anyone have any idea where the name Canada comes from? Interesting question, right? Where's the name Canada come from?
Canadian geese.
Say again?
The Canadian geese flying overhead.
Canadian geese. No, you've got it backwards.
Is it an Indian word?
It's an Indian word. Excellent. It's an Iroquois Indian word. And of course, it's not spelled the same or even pronounced the same. But they adopted an Indian word.
What did it mean? What did it mean in Iroquois?
Yeah, I don't know. It meant this is what we call this land. I think
it was geese.
Say again?
I think it was geese.
It may have been geese. Okay, yeah, Canadian means geese.
It comes from the Iroquois word Iroquois word for village or settlement.
Oh, there we go.
Canada.
Okay.
Oh,
It is an
thank you.
Iroquois word. We all,
No, it's named after bacon.
yeah. So we all know about the maple leaf flag. Anyone have any idea when the maple leaf flag became the official flag of Canada? The one down the bottom there. There were multiple proposals of what the Canadian flag should be, and eventually the one down below, as we will. Now we're going to know it for sure next month when we have Olympic ice hockey and so forth. The answer is 1965. It was quite late. So there was for quite a long time. Canada continued to run to have the British the British flag as it's part of their flag. So it lasted whatever. Still, and in these other countries, I mean, this is all trivial stuff, but it's kind of fun to some degree.
Referenda.
Say again. I guess we probably should be muted here. Over there on the left, there's everyone knows we're talking about New Zealand there. The New Zealanders have been for some time discussing, well, shouldn't we have a flag that's similar to Canada's? And they actually voted in 2015, 2016. They voted twice. The first vote was, well, let's choose an alternative flag. Which of these two in the middle is the alternative flag we want to put up against our current flag? And the second from the top won as the alternative. And then there was a second vote. Well, do we want to keep our current flag, the one off the very top, or do we want to adopt this new flag? And the answer was, we're keeping the old one, which is really still surprises me a little bit. But they are whatever. And over on the right, there's Australia. They've never had a discussion. They've never had a vote on having a new flag. But there are new flags proposed, and I would bet sometime in the future one of these will be adopted or something like that. On the other hand, they did vote in 1999 on whether they wanted to become a republic. That is, no longer have the king or queen, the monarch of Europe, be their so-called head of state. And the vote was 55 to 45. Yes or no?
No.
No, they voted no. It's amazing.
So my college roommate was a history professor who immigrated to Adelaide.
Yeah.
And he was very much part of that movement. He was interviewed in the news, and it was a bitter defeat for him.
Oh, he wanted a republic. Yeah,
He wanted.
It's going to happen. When you poll the young people, they're going to vote for it as soon as the old farts die off. But it is interesting. So maybe maybe our flag would be a little different. Whatever. The Mexican War of Independence. I think almost everyone is aware that all of Latin America became independent pretty much in the 1920s. Mexico was first. They started fighting in 1810. It took 10 years to finally become independent, but they made it. There was for a few years it was called the Mexican Empire, but the guy that was running the show that time was corrupt as hell, and they got rid of him and declared the Mexican Republic. In 1836, some of what we call Texas today broke away. Why did they break away? Well, because Mexico had banned slavery in 1829, and the Anglos that moved to Texas wanted to maintain slavery.
Welcome home.
No,
That's some scraps.
should we be if hands? I can't tell if hands are going up or not, John. How are we?
Yeah, if you want to speak out, raise your hand.
Well, how can we see the
usual mechanism? You'll see it up there.
Okay, yeah, raise your hand if you want to.
And if you're not going to ask a question, be sure to mute, because we pick up casual conversation.
And we'd like to answer questions, but so when we hear somebody talking, we think it's a question. In any case, Mexico, the Lone Star Republic, Texas was free from Mexico, but they weren't part of the United States. And most politicians in the U.S. said, look, we don't want any part of annexing Texas. It's going to raise what's already a difficult, delicate issue in this country. It's going to raise the issue of slavery again. And we get enough trouble as it is. So let's just not annex Mexico. But came, well, William Henry Harrison died. He was only president for 1 month. And John Taylor, as vice president, became president. And he wanted John Taylor, President Taylor now wanted to win the 48 election. And he said, I mean the 44 election, sorry. If I'm elected president, I will annex Texas, and it'll be part of the United States. His rival, James Polk, ran on the same platform and on a pro-slavery platform, and won the presidency. And that pretty much guaranteed, one, that Texas was going to be annexed, and that there was going to be a war with Mexico. They were going to find some excuse, these slavery guys, to have a war with Mexico and grab more territory. And sure enough, they came up with a good excuse. The excuse was, well, you claim the border is down there where that purple and red sort of intersect. Texas claims that you claim, Mexico, that the border is the Nueces River. We claim it's the Rio Grande. And since we're having this fight, we're a dispute, we're just going to invade and see what happens. Well, obviously, we were going to take a lot of territory. Sure enough, just as the politicians predicted, the annexation of all that territory, which is now California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, the annexation of that brought the issue of slavery back in big time. The war is over in 1848. Well, what's happened in California in 1848? Gold's discovered. So California is going to come in as a free state real fast, real fast. The question was slave or free, and there was negotiations back and forth. The Compromise of 1850 said, "Okay, we will give you guys California as a free state, but we want something in return." And in return, the Southerners said, "Okay, see all the new territory called the Utah Territory, the New Mexico Territory. That is now going to be up to the people that live there when it comes in the state to decide whether it's slave or free. Forget the 3630 parallel line that was drawn in the Missouri Compromise. If Utah people want to be slaves, okay. Furthermore, we want a stronger fugitive slave law. If slaves on their way, it's up to the government to bring them back." That same compromise, D.C., which was surrounded by Washington, D.C., which was surrounded by slave territories, Virginia, U.S., and Maryland, was declared slavery was abolished in Washington, D.C. at that very moment. Fascinating sort of stuff. And only 4 years later, the discussion was, well, we have these other territories, Nebraska and Kansas. What about them? Since Utah and New Mexico, when they come in as states, maybe 3 or 4 different states, since they can choose slavery or non-slavery, what about Nebraska and Kansas? And Stephen Douglas, who was trying to get a transcontinental railroad approved, he wanted it to go from his state, from Chicago to San Francisco. He said, what do you guys, what will you slave people give? What do you need to okay the railroad to go from Chicago to San Francisco, as opposed to New Orleans to LA? It's going to be one or the other. What do you, well, we want the citizens of Kansas and Nebraska to also have the right to declare themselves slave or free in 1854. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out where the hell this is going to end. It's going to end in the Civil War. The question here to raise is: would any of this happened if we'd have lost the War of Independence and been a dominion of Mexico, a dominion of Britain, just like Canada and Australia and New Zealand, so forth. So here's some stuff that came to mind for me, just sort of brainstorming. Well, here's a couple of questions that I would like to think through. Maybe have some other people help think through. If we had not become an independent country what was when was the treaty? 1783, I think, finally, and stayed a dominion, like Canada, like Australia, and like New Zealand. How different might we might be? I would say, above all, more than anything else, forget slavery for a moment, forget urbanization for a moment, industrialization, blah, blah, blah. We would have probably come in as a, oh, that's hard to see, John. I don't know if we can even see that.
Read it up there.
Yeah.
You can see it.
Yeah,
They can see it.
we would. Well, people can see this. I happened upon this and I thought, oh, this is. I remember reading this.
We can't see it.
You can't see it. I will
No.
read. I will barely read it. I can read it. I can barely read it myself.
The yellow stuff down below, you mean, or the?
This is who's this? Who are we picturing here? Who's this guy? This is Harari. This is the guy that
Harari.
Harari, from the Israeli historian philosopher, written a couple books. We actually read one as a group one time, and he's one book. He said, "Look, the decisions humanity's got to make in the next generation, probably the most important decisions humanity's got to make ever in the human of humanity, the history of humanity. There's some really tough stuff." But he said, you know, if I were asking someone's opinion, I would ask this question: what was the biggest mistake your religion, your ideology, your worldview committed? And if you can't come up with a good answer to that, I wouldn't trust you for 5 seconds. If you couldn't come up with an answer to what did your religion, your ideology, your worldview, what mistakes have been made, which seemed to me a reasonably appropriate introduction to the idea. Well, so what if we'd have lost? We didn't, but what if we'd have lost? Above all, for my mind, we would have come in if we would have stayed as part of the British Empire until, let's say, 1876, just like Canada, and be given Dominion status about the same time. We'd have almost certainly come in as a society, a set of people that was far more interested in the issues of fairness than liberty. I've just I googled that question and came up with, and not surprisingly, came up with some guy from New Zealand asking this very issue. My own point, almost exactly this time of year, 12 years ago, my wife and I were traveling with some friends. We were in New Zealand with a New Zealand buddy who said, "You guys should read this book." Or he turned it to me. You're a historian. You should read this book. He handed me a 500-page book. We were going to be there 2 days. I said, but I did read the introduction. And the introduction, the guy said, "Well, here's the basic question I have posed. Both countries were parts of the British Empire. Both have become independent, blah, blah, blah. How come New Zealand turned out so much differently than the United States?" And of course, there's a whole bunch of answers. It's smaller, blah, blah, blah. But he said, here's the point that I'm going to drive home. He said, I did a Google search or a computer search of the word that was most important for those that were demanding independence in the United States, or what was going to become the United States back in 1776. And the word that came up over and over again was liberty, freedom, liberty, freedom. In New Zealand, it was almost 100 years later, and the word was fairness. Over and over and again. He said, so things had changed in the time that we, New Zealanders, Canadians, and Australians became independent, as opposed to 77. Says, well, what had changed? There's two, we're going to talk a lot, I assume, or maybe we'll get discussed in it because Trump's going to do the talking about the Declaration of Independence in 1776. That's one famous publication in 1776. But there is this other one, if many of you are aware of it, the Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations was published the exact same year. And it's fascinating to look at the contrast. Do we have a question here, John?
We've got somebody who wants to come in.
Somebody's coming in. Hold on, people.
Not sure who it is, but go ahead.
Okay. We're well aware, surely, of what the Declaration of Independence claimed and the objections to British rule were. We don't have to talk about that too much. We've heard it over and over again. So switch over to Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations. And of course, you've heard about that because he's claimed to be the author of capitalism. Well, that's kind of nonsense in many ways. But nonetheless, he wrote this influential book, or at least claimed to be an influential book. What was Adam Smith's goal in wanting to have free competition across the economies? Well, John, I've lost my ability to move here. Hold on, Franks. Yeah. He wrote a lot about the stuff that's quoted up here. The poor man goes out, comes back in unheeded, and when in the midst of a crowd is in the same obscurity as if shut up in his hovel. Or another one, the chief part of human happiness arises from the consciousness of being beloved. And he writes a lot about this, not in The Wealth of Nations, frankly, but in another book. But it's insinuated in The Wealth of Nations. He said, look, what makes people feel like they're worthy is to be recognized, to be beloved, to be known in the community as someone that's respectable. And we don't have, there's an awful lot of that doesn't exist in our country right now, in Britain in 1776. And I want to propose how to make that change. We're getting people coming in, John.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, whatever.
Two.
And so he's writing this Wealth of Nations saying, this is my goal, is to propose a system in which people feel more beloved. The poor in particular are going to get a better shot. Why is that not happening now? And what's the solution? And we're having, so he had a lot to say early in The Wealth of Nations. He says, look, I don't like market prices. I like natural prices, which is an odd thing to hear from what we hear from Adam Smith. He said, market prices are just these short-term prices jump up and down. They jump up and down because of manipulation, monopolies. Government is not allowing free and fair competition. Blah blah blah. I would like to propose mechanisms whereby the natural price, the price that is the best kind of price, a real price, what ought to be the real price comes, the market price comes as close as possible to the natural price. What's the natural price? He describes it as, look, these guys writing whoever's writing in 1776, that whole time period, is going to use the word natural over and over and over again. They're obsessed with the Enlightenment philosophy going on at the time. Newton had found some natural laws of physics and others with geology and so forth. And he had a whole set of people saying, we want to find the natural laws of human society, the natural laws of economics. I think the average person doesn't think that way anymore, except, come on, there's no such thing. These are human-made laws. There's no such thing as a law of gravity for economics. And but these guys talk that way. They may as well say God-given price. So what did Adam Smith say? This is what I think Adam Smith says should be the natural price of things so that society is better. The price ought to reflect what's necessary to rent the land, to produce the product, the cost of materials to produce a product, the wages of labor. And then it's completely fair that the entrepreneur that is doing all that stuff gets a profit. And what should that profit be? It should be no more than the common neighborhood level of existence for the average person living in this neighborhood. And it's not that. And the reason it's not that, and we got these goddamn market prices instead, is because of governments don't play fair. They give their buddies monopolies. They pass laws to restrict trade, the Navigation Acts, for example, that you can't sell, you can't bring anything into, you can't, no matter who you are, if you're going to trade with England, everything has got to come to England first. And if you want to send it, if the new colonists want to send something to France or something to Russia or Germany, it's got to come to England first. And then after that, it can go on to these other countries and we'll take a cut of it. He said, that's disgusting. we should have free and fair competition. Everyone should have the same information. Everyone should have a fair price and so forth and so forth. His goal was to make life better for poor people. And these books are written at the same time. And the misinterpretation of Adam Smith drives me up a bloody wall. Many of us tried to correct that in high school history, and we did a pretty good job. And then people left their class and went out, and they got it all wrong. He excess high profits. He said, if you got high profits going on in a society, that is a sure sign that society is going to hell in a handbasket. It is not something that anyone should be happy about. It is a sure sign that the market is being manipulated. It's not a sign of a healthy society. If you want to see a healthy society, profits should be relatively low, and money should be people should be using whatever extra anything above a normal profit should be reinserted into the economy, used for human benefits, yada yada yada. He would look at the graph there on the right and be disgusted, and he'd say I'm sharing stuff that I think you've all seen 1,000 times, but whenever you see it, it's kind of overwhelming. John sent me this. It's quite a disturbing graph. There's a pyramid of wealth, of the number of people over on the left that have certain amount of wealth. A second inverted pyramid of how much wealth those people on the left actually have. This is globally now. So adults on the planet, he says, the graph says there's 3.8 billion adults in the world. Well, we're not going to count kids. They don't count yet because they don't own wealth yet. They're getting inherited. But if you take that pyramid on the left, the number of adults that own over $1 million of wealth, it's only 60 million in the whole planet. It's only 1.6% of the world. That 1.6% of the world these days holds 48.1% of the world's wealth. Flip it upside down. Adults who have less than $10,000 worth in wealth, and most of them are going to have a whole lot less than that. That's nearly half of the adult population on the planet worth. It's 40.7% of the world, and that 40.7 controls 0.6% of the world's wealth. Adam Smith would have been disgusted by that and would have said, okay, my formula in 1776 didn't work out so well, so let's go to another formula. Just to tease it a little bit, people said, we shouldn't really do these pyramids of graph. Here's a better shape to show the wealth distribution across the planet. And interesting enough, we'll call it the champagne glass. And you can see that the bottom 60% of the planet has almost no bloody wealth. And if you say, let's go a step further, say, if you really do that graph correctly, it's even more grotesque than that. So the whole notion that Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, promoting free competition, free markets, so that because competition would sort out who was deserved to have all this wealth, is utter horse manure. He was interested in a kinder, more gentle society where the poor that were living in these hovels had a better shot and had the chance of gaining some wealth, blah, blah, blah. The misinterpretation of Wealth of Nations, as I say it, I repeat, drives me up a wall. But lots of other stuff had been misinterpreted. So what was really going on?
Somebody have their hand up?
We passed by.
That's okay. Never mind.
We'll keep going. So 1776, the Declaration of Independence. The colonial property class, these are the guys who are going to run the show on the independence, were frustrated with the proclamation of 1763. If you watched, most of you know this anyway, but if you watched what's his name, Ken Burns, you're well aware of 1776, where the British said, "Look, we got to deal with the Indians," and right down the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, everything on the west of that line on the Appalachian Mountains is Indian property. And you colonists, we saved you from the French. We've given you more freedom than you would have had if the French had won. You got to stay on the east side of the Appalachians. Well, you had guys like Washington and Franklin and so forth that were already speculating land in Ohio, and they wanted that land in Ohio. So they were frustrated by that. They were frustrated by the profitable smuggling that was going on in New England, any sort of taxes whatsoever. I should have added to this list. They were also worried, especially if you were in the South, worried seriously about the very rigorous discussions, debates going on in Parliament, British Parliament at the same time about ending the slave trade. And that almost passed in this time period, came very close to passing. By the 1850s, 1860s, it was a completely different set of priorities in the British Parliament. I mean, the Communist Manifesto had been written. It didn't have to be written. People knew already. The miseries of the Industrial Revolution were pretty obvious to the average person. Where slavery still existed, it was obvious. It was bad. What imperialism was doing to other cultures around the planet. I mean, have a look at the wonderful British official down at the bottom, in the bottom picture there at the lower right. What was going on there was disgusting. And even some of the self-important discussions of the elites about natural freedoms and so forth that were coming out of the Enlightenment had been shown to be a little bit disgustingly self-serving. Things had changed by the time you get to 1850s, 1860s in the British Parliament, and what the priorities were and where the thought was going and where the legislation was going, as opposed to what was going on in 1776, in which Adam Smith correctly said, and our July 4th Declaration of Independence correctly said, I mean, the British Parliament at that stage was fairly disgusting in itself. It's self-promotion and not paying attention to the needs of all the common people, yada, yada, yada. But if we have somehow lost that war of independence and become independent in 1750s, 1760s, the British Parliament would have been different. It would have a different set of priorities. And we would have maybe been a very different country. I'm going backwards, sorry. I asked that very question of AI, and AI said this. The question was something like, what explains the greater emphasis on fairness when the countries of Australia, New Zealand, and Canada came independent, as opposed to the whole notion of the importance of liberty and freedom in 1776? And AI's answer was fairly simple. It said, look, things had changed by the time you got to 1750s. If you go to number one there, the influence of Benthamite utilitarianism, this AI's answer was, by the time the colonies were forming in the 18th century, the colonies, that is Australia, New Zealand, Canada, were forming, the 18th century Lockean focus on natural rights, liberty, and so forth, which drove the American Revolution, had largely been superseded in British thought by the Jeremy Bentham's utilitarianism. He's famous for saying, look, here's what the government should be working for: the greatest happiness for the greatest number. We have to recognize that there's a lot of people that are not being treated well in our society. Government needs to be focused on making things better for the average person. And sure enough, it happened. It didn't happen overnight, and there were still many complaints right up to World War I that the British government was still not still dominated by too many rich, and still more focused on the benefits of the working of the property owning classes than the workers and so forth. But massive changes had happened nonetheless. So you have this whole, when you teach European history, this is chapter after chapter of this. And the British get credit for doing it better than anybody else. They did it peacefully, as opposed to you needed the French Revolution, you needed the wars of Bismarck to unify Germany. and similar kind of warfare in Italy and so forth. The British got it done because Parliament switched. It didn't become socialist overnight by any means, but the Reform Act of 1832, this is way too much information, I suppose, but the bottom graphic over on the right says, so why did 3 million strong Chartist petition fail? And the answer is it didn't fail. They won. It just took a while. The Chartists in 1840, while Karl Marx is publishing and Engels is publishing the Communist Manifesto, in 1848, the Chartists in the same year have got 3 million British signatures saying, these are the things we would like. We would like universal male suffrage. We would like a secret ballot. We would like people that own no property to be elected. They have as much chance to be elected to Parliament as those that have. You could only be a member of elected to Parliament if you own property in 1848. And every bit of that happened. It just didn't happen in 1848, but it happened in Britain without having a revolution. And this is all happening while Canada and Australia and New Zealand were still part of the British Empire. And so one would have assumed John's trying to see who's asking a question. You got a hand up.
Somebody came in.
Someone came in. So my argument would be if we were still part of the British Empire, we'd have been part of this discussion, part of the evolution of the priorities of the British Parliament. They were clearly not taking care of only the rich landowners. That was the case in 1776, and we'd have almost certainly been a different country if that had been the case. Of course, that didn't happen. So John's we're going to more reforms, the Factory Acts, the Public Health Acts, poor laws, abolition. So the British are going to abolish slavery in 1833. There's all sorts of stuff going on here. You can you have a chance to go look at all this stuff. The point to be made is the reforms were happening. The pressure was on. The number of males that could vote had expanded substantially. Still wasn't universal. That wouldn't happen until 1918. Now, the contrary argument would be, well, you have the same stuff going on in the United States. Well, that's true. That's true. You're having similar reforms, education after the Civil War, the land-grant colleges and blah, blah, blah. Nonetheless, a kind of mythology had been established in the United States from the principles of 1776 that are still with us today, and I will argue are to some degree destructive, as opposed to it's liberty, 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 freedom, 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 blah, blah, blah. John, I'm still. So, no, blah, blah. So instead, we ended up, instead of having you go to Parliament to get things changed, local control. We're well aware of the arguments about local control in California. Yeah, who's going to force Walnut Creek and Lafayette and Orinda to build more goddamn houses? And we got all the NIMBYs and so forth. But we've got this tradition of local control, local control. Well, it was a fallback since the founding fathers couldn't come up with an agreement on anything government was supposed to do for anybody except give them freedom. So you have a tradition of local control that grows out of that because the U.S. government isn't doing a damn thing for you. And even though you have the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that come out of the Civil War, it really didn't have a great effect on this whole mythology of local control being the best. Nor did the Progressive Era reforms, nor did the Civil Rights Era reforms have that much control. It's still alive and well. People should make their own decisions. They know best what's better for them. Well, that's how convenient. If the taxes are too high in California, just move to a local control Texas where the taxes are lower. There's not much of a unity of who the hell we are in the United States. And we're going to hear it over and over again. What a unified, wonderful country. We're all in this together. It's more or less nonsense compared to some of these other countries. The reason I've got all the stuff on the graphics is not for you to read, is for me to read, because I'll forget what I'm going to say. And so instead of government saying, look, the British government was stick with this, stick here with British, stick with us as Canadians, stick with us as Australians. We hear you. There'll be legislation to make things better. It's coming from Parliament. It's coming from central government. The American answer was just go west. There's where the land of opportunity is. You couldn't get land in the best tobacco country, the best tobacco planting territory in Virginia. It's all owned by Washington and Jefferson and all those presidents. Just go west. There's plenty of land there. Well, there's a couple problems with that answer. One was there's already people there in the West. They called them Native Americans, and by the time you got to annexing what had been northern Mexico, you got the Spaniards, Mexicans living there too, and so you're not just going west to empty territory. You're going to have to eliminate or put down some another set of people. Another problem with that is once you have a whole different set of human beings, and it was a massive differentiation about who's moving west. You had ethnic diversity. You had religious diversity. Mormons, for example. You got slave or free diversity of people moving west. You got people that have arrived just 5 years ago from Sweden or are fifth generation born Americans. You got all male prospectors who are going out there, or you got families themselves, and you get this massive diversity of people moving west. There's no way in hell you're going to get a consensus among those various communities moving west of what kind of society they're going to try and create. So you got differences all across the country, and it won't we continue to. It drives me up a wall. You can hear the tone of my voice. Talk about how wonderful it is to have all this diversity. We have all this experiment. Well, maybe, but we're also a hell of a divided country now that doesn't like each other in many ways and fights like crazy. So what more? I mean, you know what? We're going to hear it all year long, to the point that I'm going to walk out of the room. The life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, secure the blessings of liberty, the Constitution. Give me liberty, give me that. The Liberty Bell, the Statue of Liberty, the land of the free, the home of the brave, free markets. My country 'tis of thee, the free land of liberty. You've even got Liberty Mutual insurance company down there, Liberty University. I mean, there's nothing wrong with freedom, except when there is something wrong with freedom, like the goddamn Second Amendment, for example. So that's awfully emotional on my part, and that's you can see why I had some high school kids would go home and say, you know, Mr. Thomas is really wacko today. The guy, we had to calm him down. But this American, here's a book. Here's an author John may have already talked to you about, Colin Woodard. He has written a very interesting book. Here's a second book he's written, and he's got a third book out now.
I think Michael has his hand.
Okay, Michael, finally.
Yeah, one of the questions I would have, because I'm not sure about all of the history, but had not we been free from Britain, being involved in some of their colonial activities, some of the wars that they had been involved in? I think of World War One, where we didn't get involved in it until 2 years after it had begun. But I'm sure there are many other instances where had we been part of England, Britain,
Yeah,
we would have been involved in a number of
Canada
conflicts.
did, yeah. Anzac, and some of you are well aware, know what Anzac Day is. It's celebrated with great emotion in New Zealand and Australia. Anzac, Australia, New Zealand, they fought. They were into World War One immediately, as was Canada. This is one of the reasons why Canada got substantially more freedom granted to them from the British Parliament after World War One. So surely that would have been the case. Now, whether that would have been a good thing or a bad thing, who the hell knows? We wouldn't have had President Woodrow Wilson for sure. So yes, that's a darn good. Here, I mean, this is all fantasy speculation anyway. It didn't happen that way, so what are we going to do about it now? But there is an irritation on my part that we're going to celebrate liberty all up the wazoo this whole goddamn year, and I'm just so sure that liberty is a good thing, or liberty overstated is such a good thing. Freedom to buy guns, freedom to do this, freedom. This is what I want to do. The libertarian AI crowd, blah blah blah. Colin Woodward's book written in 2016, he states it directly. The biggest fundamental question still in American political society is the struggle between individual liberty and the common good. And other countries have resolved that more than we have, English-speaking countries, primarily, I would argue, because they stayed part of the British Empire until much later, and were part of that whole change of the emphasis in the British Parliament itself. And this guy has actually continued to do some research. He's an interesting character. He says, "Look, oh boy, we've really this is not the same. Whatever." This Woodard has established a public opinion survey. Establishments in some university in Rhode Island, I think. Here's one of his more interesting questions. And they do, the research is well done. There's lots of people surveyed. He said, "Well, which of these two statements would you prefer? Are we united not by a shared religion or ancestry or history, but by a shared commitment to American founding ideals? We have inherited equal rights. We don't want to be pushed around. We want the freedom to pursue happiness as we wish. Would you prefer that as our guiding principle, or would you prefer the one below? We are united as a country by a shared history, traditions, values, fortitude, character as Americans, the people that value hard work and individual responsibility and national loyalty." Yeah, I mean, it's too fast, and it's not fair to throw it out without you have a chance to read that. But he said, these are two different sort of ideas of what holds us together as the United States. He said, we asked this question, 63% of Americans prefer the one above, that we're united by a common set of values, not by a common set of history. That is ethnicity, blah, blah, blah. But you have a third that responds more to the bottom. And you know very well how this is going to play out. Or maybe you don't. By far, the largest percentage of people, age group wise, that preferred the common civic, that we were united by civic ideals, are younger people. 34% at the 18 to 24-year-old by 34% margin, even higher by 25 to 49-year-olds. But you get to older people, and it's less and less and less. You got an incredible difference between those that support Trump and those don't. Those that supported Trump are sort of identify as Republicans. The 7% of them, by a 7% margin, they prefer the bottom statement, that we're more united by ethnicity, by a common history, and so forth. Whereas Democrats, independents prefer the upper statement.
We're at 3 o'clock.
We're at 3 o'clock. We're done. Well, that's perfect. We're almost done then. So I would. To me, this is by far the biggest difference that we would have as a country if we'd have lost that war of independence, which we would have had if France hadn't come in. We'd have never gotten independence. If the French had not come in and said, after the Battle of Saratoga, we will help out, it was pretty much over already, and was going to continue to go over. The number of soldiers that was leaving and going home to their farms was disappearing. We would have ended up living in civil war. Then what would have happened to Washington? Those guys, they'd probably been hung. Yeah, big deal. We wouldn't be called. It wouldn't be Washington, D.C. It would be God knows what. Who knows where the capital would be? So I'd like tomorrow that when we come back to be, maybe that's way too abstract. I would argue that slavery would have ended a lot earlier. then and it would not have ended with the Civil War. I would argue that that the South would have industrialized much earlier and it had been much more like the North than the kind of plantation South that it was that it eventually become. I think there's at least the argument that Native Americans would have been treated better if we'd have been more like Canada, but that's I suspect Mexico would be a lot bigger country than it is now, and they're better able to stand up to us than it is now. I think things would be a whole hell of a lot different if we'd have lost that War of Independence. So we can go back to that next time.
Okay. So let's open it up. Comments, questions.
Well, I have a comment.
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I was going to say this is coming at it from another session we had a while ago. I can't remember the name of the author, but I think the book name was Breakneck that John had quoted. And he described China as a land of engineers and the United States as a land of lawyers.
Lawyers, yeah.
And I mean, we have lawyers all over the place. They call them billboard lawyers, I've learned. Lawyers who advertise their services. And, you know,
we also call them ambulance chasers, but never mind.
Well, ambulance chasers, billboard lawyers, but we have this proliferation of lawyers, and everything has to go through some kind of long legal battle to achieve maybe one tiny incremental change. And we're constantly going back to saying, whatever Trump's doing, we're going to sue, and it's going to go all the way to the Supreme Court, work through this laborious system of courts to get to 8 justices who are going to make a decision, as for instance, tariffs. If he can just unilaterally raise tariffs, you know, this is how things have come. Everything's a legalistic argument.
Yeah, this will be the point that I would like to end on next week. To say, I'm reasonably sure if we'd have lost the War of Independence, we would have a parliamentary government, not this presidential system. And if you one of the and you say, well, you know, what's it? A government's a government, which is exactly what Americans say. Governments can't do anything damn good. They just we need to keep them out of our lives, which was the attitude in 1776, and a fair attitude in 1776. But by 1860, 1850, 1870, when Canada, Australia, and so forth became independent, the parliament had just changed dramatically, and the attitude toward what governments can do and should do had changed dramatically. And we didn't inherit that. We inherited, you know what we inherited? We inherited this odd government system that no one else in the world has copied. And after World War II happened, well, I'll share this next time. There was a lot of new countries became independent. Germany was devastated. Many of them said, you know, we probably should have a government like you. And all our political scientists said, good God, no. We've had experience with it, and we let us convince you. You do not want to copy us. And we have figured out ways to make it work, kind of, but there's a lot of danger about it, and there's a lot of problems with it. And no, don't. We want to recommend you do something a little bit different. There's a lot of good data. I'll share it. If there's organizations out there that, to their credit, ask the question of which countries in the world are doing the best on social progress. And we got 1,000 different measures. How's their healthcare system? How's their education? How's violence in their society? And you can argue about some of the specifics that they would measure. But every year, and they've just recently published the 2026 information from last year's data, and you go down the top 20 countries, 17 of the top 20 countries have parliamentary systems, and the 3 that do not have our system. In fact, you can't find anyone in the world that does have our system with an electoral college, you know, the senators that have 6-year terms and blah, 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 and a Supreme Court that has a lifetime We can talk next week about, so why did we get that? Why did we get this really odd system of government that frankly no one else has copied? And we got a problem with it right now. Obviously, Michael said it's a problem.
Tom.
So Ramsay, let me ask you a simple, basic question here. If you had your choice, what country would you want to live in?
In 1972, I said, I'm done. And I left. And I had no intention of coming back. And I came back because of family. And I came back and said, I'll become a high school teacher, and I want to raise this question to my high school students.
So suppose you didn't have family, what country would you live in?
It's Germany.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Germany.
Germany?
Yeah.
He's got a really good high school friend that lives in Germany, in Frankfurt, and he's visited him. We went with him once. But yeah, so there you got your answer. I thought he was going to say Singapore, but okay. Pepper.
Yeah, thanks. Ramsey, great. I have a much better understanding of Adam Smith, and I'm going to have to take your interpretation and bring it to a friend in discussion, but I appreciate it. My question is, you speak as if we're a monolith. You know, we didn't lose we won the war, but yet you also point out that, you know, there's these two groups, sort of the libertarian, independent, and then the communist or public health, or however you look at it society-wise. But there's a lot of gray in there, and the country is still divided. One could argue that the South would still like to secede, right? In that, and given that, and here's my question, given that and given Trump, which is a crazy wild card, who knows, right, exactly, but where do you see that balance going? What do you see happening?
But my argument has always been that we have to suffer pretty badly, just like Germany did, and just like Japan did, and realize that we're confused, and so I'm all for the stock market collapsing tomorrow, and but then I say no, I'm not, because I'm going to die, and my kids and my grandkids and so forth are going to suffer big time. So it's confusing. Countries work this out, but it seems to me you have to suffer before you can work it out.
Suffering is our
as a single analogy, I think it's a fair. It was a piece of luck for the United States, in my opinion, that the stock market crashed. It wasn't the stock market crash wasn't the big deal. The big deal was the banks failed in 1929, and then we were done. And it happened only 6 months into Herbert Hoover's presidency. So the country had almost 4 years, 3.5 years to figure out that Hoover, who was a decent person, he was a good man, but he and his colleagues did not have answers to solve the misery that we were in, and we had to try something new. And so when you got to the election of, as you well know, the election of 32, not only did FDR win by an enormous amount, he also came in with a huge Democrat majority in the Senate and the House, and could push through legislation that reformed and changed us dramatically as a country. And at first, he had to put up with the Supreme Court, which was still populated by all those conservatives that the years and years of conservative governments had put in place, who were declaring his legislation unconstitutional. And so he threatened to say, okay, you keep doing this, I'm just going to put 5 more. We had the ability to do this. We're just going to put 5 more members of the Supreme Court. We're going to expand from 9 members of the Supreme Court to 13 or 14 members, which we have a perfect constitutional right to do. and all my legislation is going to be declared constitutional. And the textbooks say, well, that failed. He didn't get that done. I said, bullshit. The very first decision made by that same Supreme Court after that threat was to say, well, actually, the Social Security Act is constitutional. That's okay. We'll go along with that. And we went through from 1933 through the abortion through 73. Help me out here, God, my poor old brain.
Roe versus Wade.
Yeah. That Supreme Court that had been cobbled together by progressives, by FDR, by Eisenhower went along with it as well, ruled in favor of the common man, blah blah blah. Well, but the luck was, to repeat, that we had 4 years, 3.5 years. America said 3.5 years, right? Hoover doesn't have a clue of what he's doing, and I think we're in the same position now. I hope that we're going to suffer. God named Greenland may suffer. I don't know, but step by step by step, the American public is coming around, I hope, to saying this isn't working. We cannot keep going down this libertarian for capitalism. Those graphs of you'll see a graph next week where the per capita income in the United States has been going up, even though it's not well distributed. It's been going up steadily since 2011. The American rating on the social development has been going down steadily since 2011. Things are simply not working. Why did it work beforehand? This is Piketty had it exactly right. We were in charge of the goddamn world from 1945 to 1975, 1960. And we keep there's a certain set of people that thinks we still are. And that just flat out isn't the case anymore. And it's been a long non-adjustment, in my opinion, that we're still stuck with, well, what we're stuck with. God, Venezuela. God, good God, we got to go. Yeah.
Okay.
I've got my blood pressure is through the roof. I got to go home.
Well, you've helped.
A spirited discussion.
Hey,
Okay.
John,
See you next week.
John, can I just add one more comment?
Sure.
So I looked up, I asked artificial intelligence, advantages and disadvantages of living in the USA and Germany. And here's what AI came back with. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying what artificial intelligence came back with. Both the USA and Germany offer strong quality of life, but they differ sharply in cost of living, healthcare, work culture, and social systems. Your ideal choice depends on whether you value flexibility and a higher earning potential, United States of America, or stability, social benefits, and work-life balance, Germany. Just something to think about.
Well, good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who's sure, exactly. That debate continues.
Pay 50% tax in Germany or 35 here, and get good schools and good education and good health care, or get what we get.
Okay, well, so we got a week to mull all this great stuff over, and Ramsay will finish with a flourish, and we'll have the final answer next week.
Yeah, it's true. We'll have the final answer next week.
All right, thanks, John. Thanks.
But India, we're gonna ask the Indiana football team what the answer is, because they know better than anybody.
All right.
Hoosiers. What?
Okay, bye, guys.
They just shut his face off. Bad.
He said goodbye.